Good morning, everybody. All right, we're going to move on into our research process. We're going to talk a little bit about getting started with your thesis. By no means do you have to have that completed today, but I definitely want to make sure that you are getting started on that process. So I did post my research framework that I kind of drew out and sketched last week and went over with you just to remind you some of the things I was thinking. So as I model through my thesis process, it kind of starts to make sense. So these were kind of some of the topics I, brainstormed. This was essentially the character I chose, some of the factors that I considered. I talked a little bit about potential sources, and then here I drafted through, where I wanted to enter this conversation, right? How was I going to bring it forward? And then I kind of went ahead and thought to myself what potential claims I could have. Because again, I'm not stuck and beholden to any of this. So I want to talk a little bit about our suggested thesis template and example. For this thesis, I feel it's probably going to be most appropriate to do a two-sentence thesis. I don't think that two-sentence theses or theses, if you will, are always appropriate, but because this is going to be a substantial research paper and you do have quite a few things that you want to bring in together, I think it's appropriate for this research paper. So we're going to combine some elements here. The first thing you want to think about is your thematic topic or your big idea. And remember, we talked about, for me, it was going to be those societal expectations. So if you start with your internal or motivating factors, right, on your framework. So if I go back here, again, I started with my topic, right, which was societal expectations. Then you want to think about these factors that we talked about, right? And remember, I said I wanted to go with this idea of limitations. If you start here, that is going to help jumpstart you into your thesis statement. So all of the things that I'm referencing in this thesis statement example, you know what, let me leave this open. I'm going to bring it up here. Um, all of these things are things I had already brainstormed. So my motivating factors were these limitations, right? And I told you I had to be able to identify them. So here's my first draft. Due to old-fashioned notions of femininity and deep-seated patriarchal values, which would be my systemic limitations, right? Societal expectations are systemically or systematically organized to impose limitations on women. So those are what these, you know, societal expectations are, right? That's what these kind of old-fashioned ideals of different factors that will limit women potentially. Okay, so once I've done that, I do need to make sure I mention my characters, because if you go back into the instructions for the research project, one of the things was points of comparison within these characters, right? So now that I have this overarching idea and this thesis, what I want to prove, this conversation I want to enter, how am I going to put these two um, icons, right, or these symbols or these characters, these people together in conversation to prove that? So my chosen characters are going to be Lady Macbeth and Britney Spears. And how do their given situations and experiences support my thesis, right? So, given these limitations, both Lady Macbeth and Britney Spears struggle to achieve, sorry, there's a typo there, to achieve success in what is largely perceived as a man's world. So together, combined, this would be my completed thesis. Okay, you'll notice this is a complex and complicated situation that I'm entering. I have to be able to kind of situate myself in an argument, and then I have to put these characters in conversation together to prove my argument. And so thus, I've given you my claims in that second sentence, these reasons that I'm going to prove, and the two characters that I have to put in each body paragraph, okay? So, due to old fashioned notions of femininity and deep seated patriarchal values, societal expectations are systematically organized to impose limitations on women. Given these limitations, both Lady Macbeth and Britney Spears struggle to achieve success in what is largely perceived as a man's world. And that's essentially what I'm going to prove throughout the rest of my essay. Okay, and again, this is just a running draft. This is not by any means something that I am, committed to this entire project. This is just how I took that framework and worked it into a two-sentence thesis, right? Because it is highly complex. but I had to outline all that first to be able to put those two things together. So for today, to kind of get your mind thinking about this, I don't need a draft today, but I do need you to be able to identify what your topic is, why you've chosen that. So if you go back into the example, can you tell me maybe this topic and this big idea, why you chose it? Could you maybe identify the motivating factors, right, that are things that you want to address? And then potentially, maybe why these characters and how are these situations. If you could try to work through that in today's response, we can really take that and frame it into a thesis statement tomorrow. And again, I just need us to start working on that. Next week, you're starting the research. Tomorrow, you're going to start looking at the databases. Remember, we're doing this in two parts. You have your first two annotated sources due as part one, your second source and your works cited as part two. That's starting next week. And it's a short week, so the more that we can think through it, the better. We are talking about our feedback for our argument time writing and then our feedback from AP Classroom. If you have a scheduled conference today, make sure that you attend. If you can't, please reschedule. If you would like a conference earlier, especially if you're struggling through this research project thesis idea, let me know and I can hop on Zoom maybe on your lunch or after school, or just stay after the class, or you can ask during class, whatever is easiest for you. All right, folks, happy Thursday. I hope to see you on Zoom later. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow. Take care.